What happens when a single dropped pencil destroys the most powerful man in America? The answer lies in a Chicago penthouse where 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez was supposed to be invisible. "You worthless brat." The words sliced through the marble silence of the 80-floor conference room like a blade. In that instant, Alexander Stone's $12 billion empire began its death spiral. Maria Rodriguez, a custodial worker who had perfected the art of being unseen, stood frozen with her daughter Emma. The little girl was supposed to be silent in the corner with her coloring book, while titans of industry negotiated a deal that could reshape Silicon Valley. But when a single red pencil rolled across the pristine white floor, everything unraveled. Stone, the kind of man who measured human worth in quarterly earnings, didn't see a child. He saw an obstacle. His voice dripped with venom as he leaned down toward the 8-year-old. "You worthless brat." The room fell silent. The deal died. And Stone had no idea that a little girl's dropped pencil would cost him everything. Emma didn't understand this, of course. She only knew her mother's hand felt different today, tighter, protective, a silent signal that this was a world where children were meant to disappear.
Before we continue, please comment below where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe.
Maria Rodriguez believed in quiet excellence. For 15 years, she had been a ghost in Chicago's most exclusive buildings. She cleaned marble lobbies until they gleamed like mirrors. She erased every trace of human presence from glass offices that overlooked Lake Michigan. She folded towels with military precision in executive washrooms. Maria was a custodian, but in her heart, she was a guardian of order. Her work was her pride. Her daughter Emma was her universe. At 8 years old, Emma had inherited her mother's quiet nature, but possessed her late father's bright, inquisitive eyes. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she carried a small notebook everywhere, filling it with observations of the world around her. A businessman's tired frown, the way sunlight painted patterns on office walls, the gentle smile of the security guard who always said good morning. Today, Emma wasn't in school. A water main break had closed Lincoln Elementary for emergency repairs, and Maria had no other childcare options. For the first time ever, she had brought Emma to work, not to a regular office building, but to the penthouse of Millennium Tower, where the clouds seemed close enough to touch. "Remember the rules, mija," Maria whispered as they rode the service elevator. Emma nodded, clutching her notebook. "Like a mouse," she recited. "Quiet, still, invisible." "You stay in that chair by the supply closet," Maria added, smoothing Emma's hair. "Very important men are meeting today. They cannot be disturbed." "I know, Mama." The elevator opened to reveal a world of cold luxury. The conference room was larger than their entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of downtown Chicago. The air smelled of leather and fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases. In a small alcove near the service entrance sat a simple metal folding chair, the only piece of furniture that looked like it belonged to the working world. Emma settled into her designated spot, opened her notebook to a blank page, and began sketching the city skyline, transforming the steel and glass into a magical forest of sleeping giants. Maria moved through the space with practiced efficiency, making final preparations. She arranged water glasses on the massive oak conference table, each one positioned with geometric precision. She was a shadow, ensuring perfection for others. Alexander Stone didn't enter the room. He claimed it. At 52, he was all sharp angles in expensive Italian suits. His shoes reflected the ceiling lights like black marble, and his voice could cut through steel. He was on his phone, barking orders as he strode toward the windows. "No, not next week. Tomorrow. I don't pay people to have opinions. I pay them to execute mine." He ended the call and slammed his phone onto the table, causing Emma to flinch in her corner chair. He gestured impatiently at Maria without looking at her. "Coffee." The meeting began with Stone's trademark aggression. He was a hurricane of numbers and corporate jargon, speaking of market disruption, synergistic opportunities, and competitive advantages. Charts appeared on a wall-mounted screen as he pitched his vision of acquiring Harrison's boutique defense contracting firm for $12 billion, the largest deal in Stone's career. Admiral Harrison, however, was a study in calm attention. He listened more than he spoke. When he did ask questions, they were never about profit margins. Tell me about your current employees, the Admiral asked, his hands folded peacefully on the table. The engineers, the support staff. What happens to them in your integration plan? Stone waved dismissively. Standard optimization. We'll retain key talent naturally. The rest is redundancy that'll be managed through normal workforce adjustments. You have to cut dead weight to achieve growth, Admiral. Basic business principles. Harrison's face remained neutral, but his gray eyes seemed to grow colder. He nodded for Stone to continue, saying nothing. Emma kept drawing, completely absorbed in her work. She had finished the city skyline and was now sketching the men at the table. She drew Mr. Stone as a jagged cliff with storm clouds overhead. She drew the Admiral as a sturdy lighthouse, its beam reaching across calm waters. She was so focused that she didn't notice when a red pencil rolled off the edge of her notebook. It fell silently onto the white marble floor and rolled under the conference table, coming to rest near Admiral Harrison's feet. Emma saw it a moment later, her favorite pencil, the one she used for drawing sunsets. She remembered her mother's words about being invisible, but the red pencil was important. She couldn't just leave it there. Waiting for a moment when Stone was focused on his presentation screen, Emma slipped quietly from her chair. She moved on hands and knees along the wall, a tiny shadow trying to remain unseen. She reached the table and slid underneath, crawling silently toward her lost pencil. Her fingers were inches away when disaster struck. One of Stone's junior executives, eager to impress his volatile boss, leaned forward enthusiastically to point at the presentation. His knee bumped the table leg. The movement was slight, but it was enough. The coffee cup in front of Alexander Stone wobbled. It tipped, not toward him, but onto a stack of quarterly reports beside his elbow. It wasn't a flood, just a small brown stain spreading across a few pages of routine paperwork. But Stone's reaction was volcanic. His presentation stopped mid-sentence. His face, which had been a mask of corporate confidence, twisted into a snarl of pure rage. His eyes scanned for the source of disruption, and then he saw it, a flash of dark hair disappearing under the table. Emma had grabbed her red pencil and was crawling back toward her chair when she heard the roar. "What the hell?" Stone was on his feet, his finger pointing not at his clumsy employee, but at the space where Emma had been. Maria rushed forward, her hands clasped in apology, fear written across her face. "Sir, I'm so sorry." But Stone wasn't listening. He looked past Maria as Emma emerged from under the table, her eyes wide with terror, the red pencil clutched in her small fist. He stared down at this 8-year-old child, this insignificant interruption who had dared to disturb his billion-dollar presentation. The fury in his eyes was arctic and absolute. In front of Admiral Harrison, in front of his own team, in front of a mother trying to protect her child, Alexander Stone leaned down and spat the words, "Get out of here, you worthless brat!" The room went completely silent. The building's ventilation system seemed to roar like a jet engine. The city outside held its breath. Maria froze, her apology dying in her throat. Emma stood paralyzed, the red pencil trembling in her hand as tears began streaming down her cheeks. Admiral Harrison slowly, deliberately placed his pen on the table. He didn't look at Stone. His gaze was fixed on the crying 8-year-old girl, and his face was carved from granite. The meeting was over. The deal was dead. And Alexander Stone had no idea what he had just done. Back in the penthouse, Stone's presentation had completely stalled. The atmosphere was too thick to penetrate. He finally abandoned his slides and leaned forward, trying to create intimacy between two powerful men. "Look, Admiral, let's be frank. The world is competitive. It's a battlefield. You understand that better than anyone. Either you dominate or get dominated. My methods produce results. Isn't that what matters?" Admiral Harrison let the question hang in the air. Then, slowly, he pushed back his chair and stood. The meeting wasn't ending because he was leaving. It was ending because he had reached his conclusion. "Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Stone," he said, his tone formal and final. It was very illuminating. Stone, finally sensing disaster, stood as well, a desperate smile fixed on his face. "So, shall we discuss next steps?" "My legal team is ready to move forward." The Admiral walked around the table, not toward the main door, but toward the small alcove where Emma's chair sat empty. Her notebook was still there, lying open. He picked it up carefully. On the page was the drawing of the jagged cliff with storm clouds, and beside it, the steady lighthouse. He studied the drawing for a long moment, then turned to face Stone. "When I led Marines, Mr. Stone, I learned that a unit is only as strong as its trust in command. They need to know their leader will protect them, especially when they make mistakes. They need to know he values their humanity more than his own ambition." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "You build your empire on fear. Fear is brittle. It shatters under pressure. I prefer to build on character. It's the only foundation that endures." He closed the notebook and tucked it under his arm. "There will be no next steps," he said quietly, but his words landed with the force of a gavel. "We will not be proceeding with this acquisition. Thank you for your time." He walked toward the door, leaving Alexander Stone standing in the middle of his pristine penthouse, surrounded by his terrified executives. For the first time in his life, the titan of industry looked utterly, completely powerless. The $12 billion deal had vanished, not because of bad numbers or faulty projections, but because of a dropped red pencil and the ugly truth it revealed about one man's character.